Hey everybody, it's Danny Doodle, and today I'm going to go ahead and show you how to replace the brakes on your car. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to replace the rotors and the brake pads on your car. It is super simple. Some of the materials that you're going to go ahead and need, it's going to be your rotor. I'm actually using a drilled and slotted rotor. With these rotors, they are specific to which side of the car. On the box it actually indicates what side that you need to put it on. This one's the left side, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the right side of the car today. And we have our brake pads here, silicone based lubricant. This is going to be for your guide pins. And then we have a synthetic ceramic brake parts lubricant. We have our brake parts cleaner. Alright, so I just finished lifting up the car. I kind of just wanted to show you where I'm going to go ahead and put the jack stand. And it's going to go right there underneath this rail. So we're going to go ahead, back up, and then we're going to go ahead and lower the car slowly. That's it. I like to leave the jack stand underneath it just for extra safety. Don't forget to go ahead and block off the rear wheels. Alright, once you've turned the steering wheel to the right, we're going to go ahead and loosen up these two bolts right here. These are the bolts for the caliper guide pins. It's a 14 millimeter. Go ahead and get the bottom one here. Alright, those are two bolts. Once those two bolts are out, you can just go ahead and slide this off. Go ahead and just slide it straight out. And the brake pads will probably just fall off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and hang this so that we don't put any pressure on this brake line here. I'm going to go ahead and use some cable ties to hang mine. And I'm just hanging it right off of this spring right there. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on this caliper bracket. We're going to go ahead and remove this. Alright, next thing is going to be the bolts that hold the caliper bracket in place. It's a 15 millimeter, and the top one is right here. You can see that. And the bottom one is right here. I'm going to go ahead and use a breaker bar, just because I know these are going to be tight. Alright. That's the top one. And that's the bottom one. There's the bottom bolt. There's the top bolt. And this is going to go ahead and slide straight out. Alright, now that we have our caliper and caliper bracket out of the way, we can go ahead and remove the rotor. I'm using a T40 tip here on these bolts. Just go ahead and loosen those up like that. that to the side. And I'm just going to go ahead and slide it right out. Just like that. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to go ahead and focus on is the caliper bracket. These are the old pads. They still had quite a bit of pad life left, but the rotors were completely shot, so I was just going to go ahead and replace the pads with the new rotors. So those to the side. This is the brake hardware. We're going to go ahead and remove this out of the way. So just with a flathead screwdriver, you just get in there and then pry it out the way. And you can lift up on this tab right here and just knock that out. This one, we'll just slide that out of the way. Same thing with these. We'll push that. Push this out of the way, just like that. And then this one, we're going to go ahead and pry out of the way. We can get underneath here and pry up on that, just like that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that our surfaces here are nice and clean. So I'm using a wire brush on this. Clean it up real good. On both sides. You can see how dirty that is. Everything's just coming off of there. Same thing on this side here. And if you want, you can use a little bit of sandpaper on there to get it nice and cleaned up. Alright, once we got it cleaned up pretty well, we're going to go ahead and focus on these guide pins. And these are actually, they're stuck on there pretty good, so they need to be. So we're going to go ahead and pull these out, and then I'm going to show you how to clean it out and then re-grease it so that they slide back and forth easily. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, pair of pliers, gonna wiggle this out, just like that. And we're gonna go ahead and replace this little rubber as well and clean this up real good. It's important to make sure that you do clean out these guide pins and that you re-grease them, because if you don't, they can get stuck. Your pads can wear unevenly, your rotor can become damaged from it being stuck. So if you do notice that one of the guide pins is a little bit longer than the other one, so just keep in mind when you're disassembling this and putting it back together. So we're going to put these to the side. Then we're actually going to go ahead and clean these out. I'm going to go ahead and spray some brake clean in there and then clean it out with a screwdriver. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove all these rubber components. I actually like replacing these whenever I do a brake job. I just like to put everything new on there. So we're going to remove that, throw that away. And then we're also going to go ahead and pull on this rubber here. Just like that. Alright, now that it's all cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and grab our Sil Glide brake lubricant. So this is a silicone based lubricant, and the reason that we use silicone on the guide pins and not a petroleum based lubricant is because these small rubber pieces right here, with the petroleum grease, they'll go ahead and swell up, and then the guide pins won't slide back and forth as easily, or they'll get stuck. So we're going to go ahead and take a little bit and put it right on the guide pin. Alright. Take our brake hardware, slide it on. Push it all the way up, just like that. You want to make sure it goes all the way in to make sure that it seals up. So as we can see, this one isn't, there we go, that's all the way in, just like that. So the next thing is going to be a little rubber here. Just like that. Put a little bit more grease on there. And go ahead and put that back in. And see how it slides nice and easy. And make sure that you do put the boot over this little metal piece here. You use a little screwdriver, just be very careful that you don't puncture the new brake hardware. Just like that. Alright, once we finish putting our guide pins in, we're going to go ahead and put our hardware on these brackets before we put it back on the vehicle. I have ceramic extreme brake parts lubricant right here, so I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to go ahead and just put it where the hardware is going to go on. Just need a little bit, not much. So we're just gonna dab some on there, and then we'll spread it around. And on this side here. Just gonna go ahead and spread that around a little bit. And we want to make sure that we're not messy with this grease, because we don't want it getting on the rotor or on the face of the pads. Alright, like that. So once we have grease on there, we're going to go ahead and put our brake hardware on. So I have these little flat pieces here. And we're going to make sure this bottom edge right here goes on this bottom edge. And then this flat edge here goes on the inside. So this one's going to go on this side here. See if you can just like that. Okay. Your next one's going to be this. It's like an anti-rattle clip. So the way this is going to go on is we're going to go ahead and slide it on just like that. And these will clip in. So it kind of locks on the back right there like that. And like that. Another one here. Just like that. Okay. So our new brake hardware is in. So now what we're going to do is we're also going to go ahead and grease the face of this here, the bottoms here, and then the tops as well. A little bit of grease here. It's ready to go on the car. And we're going to go ahead and put that to the side, and we're going to go to the car now. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and focus on the hub and cleaning up this hub just to make sure that the rotor has a nice flat surface to mount to. Just to make sure that, again, we don't create any rotor run out and doesn't prematurely break down on us. So we're just going to clean this up. This hub is actually pretty good because it's new. I replaced the bearing on the side of the car, and that's another video that I have. And if you need to, with your hub, if you just need to sand it a little bit with a light sandpaper, this is just like a 180 right here, just lightly cleaning up any high spots on the hub. Once it's all cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and spray some brake clean on there. Get it nice and cleaned up. Then the next step is you can put some anti-seize on here. I'm going to go ahead and use this synthetic brake grease. Put a very thin film on there. Make sure that you don't get it on the studs here or on these little holes. So I'm going to do a thin layer all the way around here. And this will help to make sure that your rotor doesn't get seized to the hub. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the rotor on. My rotor comes painted. I'm still going to go ahead and I have some brake clean on this rag, just clean off the surface of the rotor, just to make sure that we didn't get any grease on it and we have a nice clean surface. And then some rotors actually come oiled with a little bit of oil on them, just to make sure that they don't get any rust on them. You want to make sure that you clean that oil off before you install them. Make sure your hands are clean and free of any grease. Same thing with the brake pads. We want to make sure that we don't get any grease on the face of the brake pads. Alright, so this is nice and clean. Ready to go on there. Make sure that you line up the two holes on the hub. Just like that. Alright, we're going to go ahead and bolt down the rotor. I'm going to use a little bit of thread locker on these little T40 bolts. Goes nice and snug. Next thing that we're focusing on here is the actual caliper. We're going to go ahead and clean up this inside edge here, and then we're also going to clean up, make sure this is nice and clean. We're going to use some brake clean on the caliper, on the piston there, and then we're going to clean up this edge here on this rubber with a cloth and brake clean. So we're just going to go ahead and make sure we clean this up. And that we clean this edge here where the rubber seals up against the piston. Kind of take your time with this and be careful not to damage the rubber seal on the piston, and just kind of clean all the way around here. Now that I've cleaned the caliper piston, I'm going to go over to where my brake fluid reservoir is. Make sure that you clean off the cap before you remove it, and the edges, just to make sure that you don't contaminate the brake fluid inside. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this cap just so that I can monitor the level when I push the piston back in. Alright, we're back at the caliper. I'm going to go ahead and use, this is actually just the old brake pad I'm using to push the piston back in. Have a clamp here. Go ahead and just push this piston in, and it's gonna go in. And this is, I just kind of monitor the brake fluid level just to make sure that it doesn't overflow. And once it's fully compressed, the brake pad will go up against the caliper. And that's it, and then just loosen it back up. Once we've compressed the piston on the caliper, we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of grease here where the brake pad's going to go up against, on this side as well. And then I'm just going to use my finger, and we're going to go ahead and put some also on the piston where it's going to push up against the brake pad. Okay, the next step is going to be to put our caliper bracket back in place. So, got our mounting bolts here. Use a little bit of thread locker on each one. Place just like that. We're going to go ahead and put our bolt in. Our second bolt here. Alright, and we're going to torque these to 66 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, next step is for us to put our brake pads in. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of this ceramic brake grease on the back of the pad here. This is where the piston is going to go up against it. And make sure that you don't get any on the face on this side of the pad. I apologize about all the noise in the background. The neighbors having their roof redone. I'm just going to go ahead and be careful not to get any grease on the rotor, on the face of the pad. It's easiest if you kind of go in with a twisting motion to put the brake pad in. That brake pad is in. Alright, so we've greased the back of this one as well here. And we're going to go ahead and put it on this side. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put these spreader clips on the pads. You just got to make sure that you have your caliper ready to go so that it will hold it closed, because these are going to want to spread open here. So we're going to make sure we have that caliper ready to go. Hold it on the top like that with the caliper in place, and then I'm going to reach down and put the bottom one in. And that's it. And then we're going to go ahead and put our caliper mounting bolts on. We're going to use a little bit of Loctite on these as well. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and get our torque wrench in an open-ended 17mm. I'm going to go ahead and hold the guide pin still, and we're going to torque this down to 16 foot-pounds of torque. So, same thing for the bottom. Once the caliper is in place, go ahead and get a nice clean cloth with some brake clean and just make sure that you clean the rotor one last time, just to make sure that we didn't get any grease on it. Once you've tightened up the bolts for the caliper, that's pretty much it. We're just going to go ahead and put the wheel back on. Once you have the wheel down on the ground, you can go ahead and torque each lug nut to 100 foot-pounds. And that's it, you're done. If you found the video helpful, please subscribe to my channel and hit like, and I have plenty more videos to come. Thank you.